What was the story of Ruby Ridge?
It was a horrible story. What happened, I don't know if you remember, is Al Gore was trying to organize the government. So ATF was afraid they were going to get picked up by the FBI and be part of the FBI. So they wanted to do something, big. So Ruby Ridge was this guy named Randy Weaver. He was a former Green Beret. He was a survivalist. And what Randy wanted to do, he was in guns. He was in the Aryan Nation Brotherhood near Naples, Idaho, which that whole area was preppers and Christian fundamentalists and John Birchers. And it wasn't unusual to have guns in that section of the country. So the ATF rolls this guy, I think Fadley, and they say, you got to get us Randy Weaver. Now, what people don't know is this Fadley goes to Weaver and meets him at a Aryan Nation meeting and says, look, Randy, I need to buy some weapons, sawed-off shotguns. So Randy says, yeah, okay. So he cut down a sawed-off shot. He cut down a shotgun. And the problem is when he sold it back to this Fadley, it was not legal or illegal. They by a half an inch or something. So ATF says, listen, this isn't illegal. You have to go get him to saw off more of the shotgun. So he did. And they had a warrant for Randy. And what happened next was a beginning of a series of events that never should have happened.
John, how do we get from what you just described, which honestly, that alone is just, it's awful to sound, but how do we get from what you just described to a dead dog, a dead wife, a dead son? That it just seems like a million miles away from what you just described. How did we get there?
Well, slowly. But first of all, it was entrapment. Entrapment, basically, without getting deep in the weeds, is making somebody do something they normally wouldn't do. So would Randy Weaver be in guns? But first of all, when the informant asked him to do it, he asked him to saw it off. So you have a problem right there. I mean, if you, the best way I can explain entrapment is, say that I'm dealing with a fence for 10 years, I'm selling them stolen goods. And I come to them one day and said, I need drugs. And they say to me, I don't deal in drugs, I just deal in stolen goods. And I say, well, I'll give you $100,000 for 2 kilos. And they do it. That's entrapment. I made them do something they normally wouldn't do. They were fenced, they dealt in stolen goods, they didn't deal in drugs. So the premise for this whole thing was entrapment. And that's why basically the only person who went to jail was a person who never stepped foot at Ruby Ridge, which was a good friend of mine by the name of Mike Vejo. But what happened is the marshals indicted him, or they issued a warrant. He didn't show up for the gun charges, and then they issued a bench warrant. And the Marshal Services was doing reconnaissance every day on his property. And one day, Randy Weaver was out there with a friend named Harris, his son, and a dog. And they ran into the marshals. And it's debatable. They still don't know who shot first, but it doesn't really matter. They killed Weaver's son, the dog, and wounded this Harris. And so begot Ruby Ridge. That was the beginning of Ruby Ridge.
How did it end?
Well, it ended horribly because what happened was the rules of engagement. So ATF takes the lead and they surround the place, and the marshals surround the place. And just like in Waco, they call the FBI hostage rescue team in. So this Mike Vejo is a high-level bureau official in Washington. He gets a call, Mike, we need you to be the logistician on this Ruby Ridge thing. We need so many toilets, so much this, so much food. So that was his job. So keep that in mind. So they surround the place, and ATF doesn't know what they're doing when it comes to sort of sieges and hostage negotiations. They're not prepared for that. So the FBI takes over. So the assistant director was Larry Potts, and he's flying to Ruby Ridge, and they're talking about the rules of engagement. Our rules of engagement have always been, you can kill someone if your life is in danger or somebody else's. About the 4th or 5th day of the siege, somebody, and it had to be Larry Potts or the FBI commander on site, changes the rules of engagement to shoot any male with a weapon that they see. Now, there were other SWAT teams up there, and there was police officers from SWAT teams from different municipalities. When they got those rules of engagement, they said, this isn't right. This isn't right. This isn't what we do. This isn't, some of them refused to do it. But what happened is at the point that Randy Weaver came out, the helicopters were going by, and Randy Weaver came out with his friend Harris, and they had guns. They weren't shooting at the helicopter. So our sniper, Lon Haruchi, shot. The first shot, I think, hit Randy Weaver, and they were running back into the cabin, and he took a second shot. And it hit Harris, but it went through and shot Randy Weaver's wife, Vicky, in the head as she was holding the baby.
Good grief.
So now you got a real, crap storm, because the rules of engagement, somebody changed the rules of engagement. I know who did it. I mean, because Mike Behu told me, and he knew it. But that was the big issue up there. That and ATF wanted to, didn't want to get swallowed up into the FBI, so they wanted something big. And the result was this: Randy Weaver got a lot of money. Nobody went there. Randy Weaver didn't go to jail. Harris didn't go to jail. Or they killed the marshal. Somebody killed the marshal the first day. They were charged with murder. They were charged with, conspiracy, guns. The only thing Randy Weaver got in trouble for at the end of this, after getting several $1 million, was his failure to report to the court. That was it. All the other, Harris and everybody else, they sued and they got money. So that tells you that there was a big, major screw up.
Don't miss Jesse Kelly Breaks History, The Forgotten Genocide, the first episode of a new series available now exclusively for First TV supporters. Visit the First TV app or thefirsttv.com to subscribe and start watching today.